Today, we're diving into a story that was deliberately buried for thousands of years. It's this absolutely bizarre, revolutionary chapter of Egyptian history that its own rulers tried to pretend never ever happened. I mean, think about that. How do you actually delete a pharaoh from history? It sounds impossible, right? Especially in a civilization that was so obsessed with legacy and the afterlife. And we're not just talking about one king, we're talking about an entire royal line. Yet that's exactly what they tried to do. So how on earth did they pull it off? Well, there's actually a term for it. The Romans called it damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. And this wasn't just, forgetting someone. This was a systematic, official campaign of total obliteration. We're talking chiseling names off temples, tearing down statues, and literally rewriting the official king list to scrub any trace that a person ever existed. But in ancient Egypt, they took this to a whole other level. An entire 30-year span of their history, what we now call the Amarna Period, was targeted for erasure. The pharaohs who ruled, the new god they worshipped, the unique art they created, all of it was marked for destruction. Just look at this. This is what's left of the capital city from that era. Not much is there. The entire city was ordered torn down, its stone blocks recycled for other buildings, and its memory just left to be swallowed by the desert. So the big question is, what could have been so terrible that it warranted this level of destruction? To get why they tried to erase it, we first have to understand the revolution that caused it all. And it really all starts with one man, a single pharaoh who decided to turn his entire world completely upside down. And this is him. He started his reign as Amenhotep IV, a pretty traditional name for what everyone thought would be a pretty traditional pharaoh. But oh boy, he wouldn't stay that way for long. He had a radical, world-changing vision for Egypt that was about to shatter 1,000 years of tradition. His revolution basically came in 3 huge, dramatic steps. First, he declared that Egypt's whole pantheon of gods, Amun-Ra, Osiris, Isis, all of them were obsolete. He said there was only one true god, the Aten, the physical disk of the sun. This, by the way, was also a genius political move because it completely sidelined the super rich and powerful priesthood of Amun-Ra. Second, he changed his own name to Akhenaten, which means effective for the Aten. And third, he packed up and abandoned the ancient capital of Thebes, building a brand new city from scratch out in the desert called Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. Now, these changes didn't just stop at religion. They sent shockwaves through every single part of Egyptian life, creating a world that looked and felt totally alien to everything that had come before. Just take their art. For more than 1,000 years, Egyptian art followed these super strict rules. It was formal, it was idealistic, it was unchanging. You know the look. Kings looked powerful, gods looked calm, and everything was perfectly ordered. But Akhenaten, he threw all of that right out the window. And the result was this style that was suddenly fluid, intimate, and, let's be honest, kind of weird. All of a sudden, you see movement, you see emotion, and you see this strange new body type. It was a complete and total break from the past. I mean, the figures from this period are shown with these elongated skulls, skinny torsos, but then wide hips and drooping bellies. It's this highly stylized, almost androgynous look that scholars are still debating the meaning of today. Was it a religious statement, a medical condition? We're still not sure. Here you can really see what I'm talking about. On the left, you've got the peak of that style with Akhenaten himself. And then on the right, you see a later, more softened version in the bust of his son, Tutankhamun. You can already see how the sharp edges of the revolution were starting to smooth out by the time the boy king was on the throne. This revolution also massively elevated the status of royal women. The famous Queen Nefertiti wasn't just the pharaoh's wife, she was practically a co-ruler. She was central to the new religion and was often depicted with the exact same authority as Akhenaten himself. This level of female power was completely unprecedented, and it was a key part of this new world order. But a revolution this radical, this fast, well, it couldn't last. After Akhenaten's death, his new world started to crumble almost immediately, kicking off one of the most chaotic and mysterious succession crises in all of Egyptian history. The succession was a total mess. After Akhenaten, there's this shadowy figure named Smen-Kare. Then there's an even more mysterious female pharaoh, Nefertiti, who might have even been Nefertiti ruling under a new name.
Then, of course, comes the famous boy king, Tutankhamun. And after him, two high-ranking officials, Ai and Horemheb, basically just grabbed power in the vacuum. It was a time of extreme instability.
And nothing shows you just how desperate and weak the royal family had become more than this bizarre series of events that historians now call the Zenenza affair. The dynasty was so fragile, the queen was absolutely terrified of what was going to happen next. In a moment of pure desperation, Tutankhamun's widow, who was likely a queen named Ankhesenaten, wrote this frantic letter to the king of their rivals, the Hittites. She literally begged him to send one of his sons to marry her, saying she was afraid and flat out refused to marry one of her servants. I mean, can you imagine? A queen of Egypt asking a foreign enemy for a husband? It was a shocking sign of just how bad things had gotten.
Well, the Hittite prince Zonanza was murdered on his way to Egypt, and the whole plan failed. And into the chaos that followed stepped this man, the general Horemheb. He seized the throne for himself. He was a traditionalist, and he was determined to restore order by wiping the slate completely clean. And Horemheb's campaign was absolutely ruthless. He ordered Akhenaten's capital city to be dismantled, stone by stone. He had the names of Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and Ai systematically chiseled off of monuments all over Egypt. And in the official records, he just declared himself the direct successor of Akhenaten's father, effectively hitting the delete key on 30 years and 4 pharaohs of history. So, to Horemheb and the pharaohs who came after him, this entire period was just an unfortunate aberration. It was a religious and cultural heresy that needed to be forgotten forever. But history, well, history doesn't always cooperate. And for almost 3,000 years, Horemheb's plan actually worked. The Amarna kings were totally forgotten. But in this incredible twist of fate that he could never have predicted, the act of erasure itself is what ultimately preserved them for us. See, because they were erased from the official king lists, their tombs weren't systematically targeted by tomb robbers like the legitimate pharaohs were. And so, in 1922, the nearly untouched tomb of a minor, forgotten boy king from this so-called heretic dynasty was discovered. And just like that, Tutankhamun, a historical footnote that Horemheb tried to delete, became the single most famous pharaoh in the entire world. Talk about irony. So while the ancient Egyptians saw this whole period as a shameful mistake, for us, it's an unbelievable gift. It's this rare, fascinating glimpse into a moment when one of the world's most conservative and traditional civilizations decided to just throw out all the rules in art, in religion, in politics, and remake itself from the ground up. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a 30-year period from a civilization as well documented as Egypt could be so nearly wiped from memory, what other radical moments, what other failed revolutions have been completely erased, just waiting in the dust to be rediscovered?